Let's talk about layers now. There's a lot going on with layers. They could be as simple as complicated as we like. So top right, it's these two overlapping squares. If I click those, that'll open up my layers. And you can see all the layers that I've been working with so far in this document for this video. And just the latest one that we've been working on. So if I click this checkbox on the layer that we're looking at now, that'll turn it off. And that applies to any layer across the board. If I want to see a layer, check it on. You can have them all on at once or have them all off. You'll also notice that there's this background color. And now this isn't quite a layer in and of itself, but it is kind of an automatic background that Procreate applies for you that you can also turn off. So if I really like this broccoli mushroom drawing, but maybe I want to save it out with a transparent background, I can unclick that background color and it just takes it right away. You can also check it back on, and if I click this, it's going to open up the Procreate palette so we can just quickly change the background color. Now this background layer is unique in this way. If you are creating, here I'll undo that and have that be back to plain white. But if you want to make a background, you can also create a new layer and pick maybe a light green and fill that layer. That can be a background, but I can't change it in the same way. There is no option in the same way as opening up the background color palette and changing it. But now this background is obscured by our fill layer. So just something to be aware of. If you export your Procreate file as a PSD, that background color will come in as a layer in Photoshop. So what can we do with layers? All kinds of stuff. First of all, it's great for keeping track of your stuff. So let's turn this layer off. And actually, I kind of want to start fresh, but I don't want to delete all of the good work that I've done so far, all of these crucial layers. I'd like to hang on to those for a bit. So maybe I'll tuck them away somewhere where they can't obstruct my vision. So I'm going to select them all and put them in a group. So to select multiple layers, well, you can select any individual layer by tapping on the screen. But to select more than one layer, after you have a single layer selected, you can click and drag on subsequent layers, and it will add them to this selection group temporarily. And you see I get two options when I've done that, delete and group. So if I hit delete, it'll delete all the layers at the same time. And if I hit group, it'll put them in a nice little drop-down folder, which I can rename if I'd like. I can twirl it down and not have to worry about it anymore. And this has its own visibility toggle too. So if I wanted to have several layers turned on in here, I can just turn all of those off now in one click. So that's pretty cool. Renaming groups and layers works the same way. So if I click on a new group that I've made, I want to rename that, and I'll just name this like old stuff. So we know it's old stuff. So how about creating a new layer? That plus sign, that's what you want to look out for. Click. And now I want to rename this to new stuff, layer 1 probably. So I'll click it. And there's quite a lot more information that comes up versus when we clicked on the layer group, but rename is right here at the top. So click rename, whoop, new stuff. Perfect. Let's say new stuff 1. I'm sure we have much new stuff to come. Awesome. Let's take a look at some of the other stuff that came up in that menu when I clicked it. So there's select, copy, fill layer, clear, alpha lock, mask, drawing assist, remember from the grids, invert, reference, and combine down. That feels like a lot of stuff, but what I'm going to do is draw another piece of artwork for us to work with. Let's take a look again at those options that popped up when we clicked on this layer. So it's quite a lot. So I'm going to talk here primarily about the features that I find most useful. There are some options here that I think are best accessed elsewhere in Procreate or with other tools. So select will select the contents of your layer, but personally, if I'm trying to move a layer about in the composition or I need to have it selected, I prefer to click on the layer and then just click over here on the transform tool, which will let you move things around. Undo. You can copy the contents of your layer, just adds that right to your clipboard, paste it if you'd like. Again, I think there are better ways to do this. You can duplicate the layer, which I'll show you in just a second. Filling the layer just does exactly what it says, and if you click that, it will flood the entire layer with your selected color that you have there up in the top right. So you can see just floods everything with one color. Quick shortcut for that. If you clear the layer, same thing, pretty simple. It's just going to delete every mark that's been made on that layer. Quick shortcut. There are also gesture controls for a lot of these. Alpha Lock is something that comes in handy a lot, and there's a similar feature in Photoshop if you've ever used that, where if you select Alpha Lock on a layer, you can see this minute change just happened where the gray in the thumbnail image has been changed with this transparent checkerboard pattern. That means that if you continue to draw on this layer with Alpha Lock turned on, so checked, only on areas that have been drawn on previously will be filled in. So let's pick a totally alternate color, maybe like an orange. And if I now, with Alpha Lock turned on to this layer, start drawing, can't see anything, and then this will start to show up. So this can be really handy if you need to recolor a layer, quick portions of your layer. Now, how Procreate works with recoloring can be really quick and convenient, but can also be a little bit imprecise. So you might be thinking, let's turn this Alpha Lock off. Maybe I wanted this line art to be orange. So if I'm just here without the Alpha Lock, like what do I do? Well, the way to recolor things ordinarily with Procreate is to drag and drop your little blob of color from your color palette up in the top right. Drop it to what you want to change and let go. So you can see that worked, but it doesn't look great. There's this fuzziness to the edges that is really not what I wanted. So to avoid things like that, that is where Alpha Lock can come in handy. And if you try it now with Alpha Lock turned on, you're still going to get the same problem. The issue is that the fill is just not reaching those pixels on the outside. You can even crank this brush up quite a bit in size, so you can really quickly fill in all of that area. But Alpha Lock is a great way to make sure that you're not running into weird issues like that. Now let's move on to layer masks. These can come in really handy. I love to work non-destructively. Masks go a long way in helping you to do that. So if you click on mask, it's going to make this what looks kind of like a new layer that is attached to the layer you're working to. And it's flooded with white here, you'll see. And you'll also notice, so if I just click down onto this new stuff one layer, my color in the top right is that orange that I was working with a second ago. But if I click on the layer mask, it turns to white. So if you've had experience with masks in other programs, it's essentially a purely black and white operating layer where if things are black on the layer mask, that is cutting out and taking away or hiding, and things in white are being shown. So we'll go up here. So if you look in the top right and you're dragging around the palette, you'll notice that it doesn't matter where on the palette that I'm dragging to. If you're on a mask layer, you're locked to the black and white values. So I'll just make this all the way down to full black. Then I'll select my layer mask, grab my brush, and start drawing. And it's almost like I'm erasing away his little ears and maybe his head. So if I open up the layers again, you can see now I got this big section of black. But if I turn it off, we get everything back. And you can invert it to get the opposite effect. You can also fill this layer, which will fill it just like we saw before with whatever color you have in the top right. So if I click fill now, we're going to get a full black layer, which means everything is masked out. But if I go in and I change this to white and fill it, we see everything. So the next thing we're going to talk about is clipping masks, which are one of my favorite things to play around with in Procreate. Clipping masks work by applying the contents of one layer to the contents on the layer underneath it. Again, only affecting areas that have been marked on. So, for example, if I want parts of this rat's line art to be orange, but I want a lot of it to be black, clipping masks might be the solution. Now, I don't apply the clipping mask to the line art layer. So if I do that, you can see things are getting weird. This isn't what I want. And it's because the line art is now clipping onto what is underneath it, which is the pink layer. So I'm going to undo that and I'll make a new layer. And so let's say I just want like a scribble of orange. Oh, I'll make the brush smaller. A scribble of orange here. And maybe like here on his back. So this is looking a little incorrect. So what happens if we make this layer a clipping mask? Then it is going here and here, applying the color on the clipping mask layer only to the line art. So this can be super handy for if you want to color only certain sections of a piece. And also, again, something that you can easily turn on and off or undo or delete and not have permanently affected the layer underneath. This can be really great if you want to, say, add some texture to your piece and not have to get too finicky with it. So maybe I want to add some like speckly fur on him. So I can add a new layer right above this green layer, which is like where all of his green fur is colored in. And I'll go to layer 12 and I'll make it a clipping mask. And I probably want to make it like a dark green. So something you can do to use colors that you've been using in your piece is if you just take your finger and you put it down on the canvas and you hold it, you have a color picker. So I can come over here and land on his little pistachio fur and let go. And you'll see on the top right that my color has now changed. Something else that's cool is you can actually toggle back and forth between your recent colors by just holding up in the top right, and it will only go back between your last color and your current color. But that's just a nice quick tip. So I'll come down here and we'll have some like dark, little green stuff, and let's pick something like noisy. What do we got that's noisy? Ooh. So yeah, what if we did like a painterly style? So I'm on my clipping mask layer. I've got this and start painting. It's a little paint rat. Or we could do something a little more. Oh, like this nice chalk one from earlier. That's like a nice painterly looking brush. Maybe if I make it big, I can start coloring that in. And you can see it's all restricted on top. And that's really cool because I can turn it on and off. I can experiment. If I want to make more clipping masks easily, all you have to do if you have one clipping mask already set is click on the bottom layer and make a new layer, and that will by default be a clipping mask. Now, if you turn that layer off as not a clipping mask anymore, it will turn off the clipping mask function on all of those layers. So just something to be mindful of. Keep an eye on things. You know, it's usually pretty obvious if something gets broken along the way, but it's also fairly easy to just bring that back, another clipping mask. My preferred method for making additional clipping masks for the same layer is to go to the clipping mask layer, the topmost one, create a new layer, make that a clipping mask, and that will also apply to the bottom layer. You can't have chains of clipping masks, if that makes sense. All clipping masks that are kind of stacked one on top of the next are affecting the same layer at the bottom. So if I add more to this layer, that is also being applied to his little fur. So drawing assist, if you come into a layer and turn on drawing assist, let's see what is happening. I will put on, oh, weird. So if you remember drawing assist from earlier, that has to do with the drawing guide in the canvas settings. So I'll turn that on. And by default, it's this 2D grid. This is the 2D grid that we were playing with earlier. And each grid has a drawing assist functionality. So what's happening here is if I turn that back on this layer, it's now snapping everything to the 2D grid. So drawing assist will always turn on the drawing assist function for whatever grid you have set, even if it's not visible. So if I edit this drawing guide and, yeah, like let's do something cool in the background that's like a quadrant. Have assisted drawing on, I'll turn off rotational symmetry, done. You can see this layer says that it's assisted. Okay, cool. Well, I actually want this to be on the layer underneath him, so, you know, it's not covering him up. So I'll come down here, make a new layer, start drawing. It's not working. So drawing assist is restricted layer to layer. And if you want to have drawing assist turned on, it needs to be on for every individual layer that you want it on. So that's why we have it here as a layer option. Click drawing assist, and now I can do a cute little background for this bud, and it's all perfect. So invert, pretty self-explanatory. If you click that on any layer, it will flip the colors to whatever the mathematical inverse of those colors would be. So just something that might be interesting if you want to get a quick different perspective on a color, you could try that. Now, reference is one of my other favorite features with Procreate's layer system. I was so excited when I found out about the reference layer functionality. If you click reference on a layer, it is distinct from what we talked about before, where you will see the reference option in the canvas. It does not have to do with something that you visually can reference. It's about a layer that other layers in Procreate will reference. And to show you what I mean, I'm going to turn off these fill color layers that I did for this rat. And I'll even turn off the background layer just so we can see everything a little more clearly. So I'm going to turn off the drawing assist on this guy just so nothing gets weird. And then I'm going to click the new stuff one line art layer and hit reference. So doesn't look like anything's changed, and that is true. So I'm going to come down underneath him, create a new layer, and I'll take my desired fill color, drag it in here, and drop it. Ooh, now it worked as intended, but it looks kind of ugly. Let's talk about that in a second. First of all, I want to show you what's happening. The reference layer, having this layer be checked on as the reference layer, means that any other layer in Procreate is going to look at that layer for what to do. That means that I can fill this line art on a separate layer, which is always desirable for me so that I have the most flexibility going forward in what I want to do with that art, with that layer. and I'm not doing anything destructive to the line art. I'm not locking myself into any particular box, and I'm also not having to sit here manually tracing in every shape to color it in. So this is pretty cool, and let's see what else we can do with it. I'm going to turn the line art layer back on and reduce the opacity, which you do by clicking this little N here and dragging the opacity down. So now it's at about 50%, and let's see what happens if we keep doing this. And keep in mind, again, I am not on the line art layer anymore. I'm on this secondary layer, which is great because, again, it makes it a lot easier for me to change the colors after the fact and not worry about it, to just have this data be separate, easy for me to use clipping masks to add texture. So this is pretty cool. And even if the reference layer is turned off, it will still work. Now I am noticing, if we just crank that opacity back up, that we have this ugly jagginess all throughout, and I'd love for this paint bucket feature, these fills, to actually fill the whole line art as if I did go in and color it in by hand, just like I did with these. It looks nice and clean. There's no weird grittiness around the edges. And you'll notice we ran into this earlier when I tried to drop fill the line art without orange. There is a way around this. So I am going to clear this layer. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab my fill color, drag it over here. And as I'm holding it, you can see I haven't let go. I haven't lifted up my pencil yet. There's this blue bar at the top of my screen, color drop threshold. And your default should be somewhere around 25%, I believe. Now, if I just drag to the right, it'll start cranking up. And you can see the holes are filling in. Now I reached the edge of my screen, didn't quite move decisively enough to fill that in where I wanted it. So let's try it again. I'll undo, grab the fill, drop it in, and then crank it up. And I'm having to go to quite high numbers to get it where I want it, but that edge is much, much nicer. While we're on the topic of coloring in layers, I do want to talk about the recolor function that Procreate has, which I just generally don't use very frequently, but can be quite handy, especially if you're combining it with this reference layer. And that basically allows you to fill in spaces with just a click instead of dropping and filling every single time. You only have to do that once. Now it can affect the color that you have on your layer. So for best practices, I prefer to work with a different color. Like each layer has its own color anyway. So I'll make another new layer and then I'll drag my secondary fill color over to his ears and drop it in. And at the top of the screen, I get a continue filling with recolor. Click that. And so you'll notice like the body fills in with green, which is not what I want. I liked that dark green. I want that dark green to be there. But there's also these little crosshairs that you can grab and you move it around and you can see what's happening. Wherever these crosshairs go, that's what's being filled. And now that I have this recolor mode happening, I can start clicking and filling in spaces. And I can rapidly fill in a bunch of white space without having to get super picky about it. And even if there are parts of this that I want to go in and clean up after the fact because there's still like threshold issues and some of these white spaces are quite small, this can save you a lot of time and wrist strength. So the last two things I want to show you for this layer menu is merge down and combine down, which do similar but different things. Merge down will, as it says, merge this layer with the one underneath it. Simple. I'm going to undo that. I don't tend to merge layers unless I have to or I have finally resolved artwork. Usually I'll have duplicated it, so I always maintain history of the working files. Another thing I like to do is keep things in groups, which is what combine down does. So click that and it'll create a new group. You can add stuff in. I tend to drop things in the middle when I make a new group, so you can get your layers a little bit out of order. Just want to make sure that you keep them as they were. We have a nice stack. So that's all for that left-hand layer menu. Let's take a look at some of the other options. So I briefly showed you when you click on this N here by the checkbox, that's going to give you some more options, including the layer opacity, which you could dial all the way down to none and have it set all the way max 100 anywhere in between. Groups do not have a group opacity function. So if you have like 7 layers in a single group, the only way that you can reduce all of the opacity of all of those layers simultaneously is to do it individually for each one or flatten the group, unfortunately. But it is an option. I'll turn that up. And then we also have blending modes, which can be really fun to play around with. So every layer starts on normal blending mode. That's what the little n is for, but you have all of these different ones. You know, if you've worked in Photoshop or other similar programs, you're probably familiar with some of these. One of the ones that I use a lot is Multiply, which is here at the top. So you won't really see anything happen on this layer, but let's say I've grouped all these. So I've grouped all of these layers, and now I'm going to duplicate the entire group. And this is also how you duplicate layers as well. So what you do is you swipe to the left and you get lock, duplicate, and delete. Lock simply means that you won't be able to edit anything on that layer, which is great if you want to protect a piece of artwork. You can lock groups as well, as you can see. Delete, self-explanatory. And duplicate, we will duplicate. I'm going to turn the bottom group off. And I'm going to click this top group and flatten, which means that it's taking all of those layers in this group and just whoosh, squishing them down to be one layer. So I'm going to do that. And now I have this guy in one layer, and then I will do the same thing again. I will duplicate just this flattened layer. Now I have 2. So I'm going to take the transform tool, move the top layer over just a little bit, and then let's play around with some blending modes. So it starts with normal again. I'm going to scroll up to multiply. And you can see it right away. We got some stuff going on. So what multiply does essentially is take the top layer and multiply what's on it with the values of what is below it. So colors are intensified and blacks are pretty much unaffected because that's sort of the max you can go. But you can see at the top there's this pink where his ears are overlapping. And anywhere the 2 pinks on these layers are overlapping, it gets a little bit darker. And the same thing with the greens on his fur. Anywhere it's overlapping, it's sort of enhanced. And you can even do, let's say we have a new layer, and it's just a circle, and we'll put a blue fill in there. Now I'm going to set this to multiply now. And because it's totally white underneath it, because all the other layers are turned off, you don't really see a change. But then I'll turn back on this layer underneath it. And you can see how the blue is affecting the bottom layer. Again, black's not really affected, but this is really fun to play around with colors to replicate maybe like a screen printing effect. One of my favorite blending modes, great place to start. Let's bring our duplicate back. Oh, only want one of these selected. And just play around with each blending mode. You might get some pretty unexpected results. And since these are pretty universal in terms of painting programs, if you're curious about any one in particular, there's a lot of information if you just Google around on what mathematically is happening or what the utility might be for one of these. But it's fun a lot of times in projects to just kind of see what you get playing around with blending modes and see what it can add to your projects.